Last and certainly not least today, speaking on reading Seuss, we have the vivacious and pensive Miss Haley Carter. Please welcome Haley.
Theodore Seuss Geisel was born on March 2nd, 1904, in Massachusetts. In his early life, he studied at both Dartmouth and Oxford, after which he wrote children's books. His first book, And to Think That I Saw It on Mulberry Street, was published in 1937. The Cat in the Hat, published in 1957, is considered his best work. Seuss died in 1991 at the age of 87. That is directly from Wikipedia and a terrible way to describe Dr. Seuss. If I was trying to discourage reading his books, that is probably how I would begin. Instead, when I say Dr. Seuss, pay attention to what comes to mind. I am willing to bet, for the majority of you, there is something with bright colors and odd shapes, perhaps an image of yourself as a child. This conception of him is so different from a recitation of the events in his life. How a 7-year-old knows Dr. Seuss is vastly different than how an adult or how Wikipedia knows him. Dr. Seuss wrote children's books, so if we want to know how to read him, we should begin with how a child would read him, and as we are no longer children, transpose ourselves momentarily into their minds. Robert Coles, child psychiatrist and professor at Harvard University, states in his book, The Moral Intelligence of Children, quote, "Preschool children are constantly trying to comprehend this gift of life given to them, what to do with it," unquote. As a child, there is a certain energy in and around you. The world is moving, and you are trying to keep up. You have an unlimited amount of questions and a very limited amount of patience. Everything is interesting. If we can understand this, we can understand the appeal of a Seuss story. On a strictly visual level, there is an immediate draw to the color on the book's cover and pages. Within the story, there are strange shapes and new places and odd invented characters that blur the line between people and animals. The entirety of the book pops at you. The entire rainbow fits on a page. People live on clovers. What's a bifferbum bird? Are eggs actually green? The book demands attention. In itself, it resembles the vivaciousness of a child. Now, for the adult or even the adolescent reading Seuss, a different approach is taken. Yes, perhaps they note the color, but that is generally not where they see the story's value. An adult reading Seuss will most likely dwell on the more serious connotations of the book. For example, take Horton Hears a Who. While a child may be more interested in the jungle of Newell, an adult may recognize that Horton the elephant is a rather complex character. Even as he is ridiculed by the entire jungle, Horton perseveres throughout the story. He is an individual who is principled, not afraid of others' opinions. Or perhaps examine some of the closing lines of Oh, the Places You'll Go. They state, "Be sure when you step with great care and tact, and remember that life's a great balancing act. Just never forget to be dexterous and deft, and never mix up your right foot with your left." It is hard to read those lines and not appreciate the larger themes they describe. In fact, many graduate theses are written on this very idea. Ben Miller, a professor at the University of Southern California, and Michael Watts, professor at Purdue University, play off the former title in their article, Oh, the Economics You'll Find in Dr. Seuss, in which they state, quote, "Using books that many students read as children or that their parents read to them makes economics more memorable and accessible," unquote. Drawn out, the distinction is evident. Adults enjoy Seuss insofar as they see his usefulness. Children like him simply because he is entertaining. In general, children are more drawn to the imagination within the story, adults to the real-world application. So, is there really a correct way to read Seuss? If we take the child's position and explore it fully, very quickly it becomes an absurd idea. If the only value in the book is the color or the drawings, everything else could be removed and it would be the same. Now, this is obviously ridiculous. The story would have no plot, no content, just bright shapes scattered across the page in random arrangement. In fact, if a Seuss book was purely imaginative, there really could be no book at all. However, the converse is not as obviously absurd. Take the adult's position. If we read Seuss simply for his application to our outward life, if we read him exclusively on the grounds of morality, human rights, citizenship, and personal identity, it necessarily follows that the imagination in the story is useless, that it is just a means to convey to children the lessons which the book teaches. If children were more mature, the colors could be done away with, the birds made real, and the rhyming eradicated. If this is what Seuss advocated for, he would not be an author at all. Instead, there is something valuable not just in the story's moral, but in the act of imagining the world that Seuss draws up. Seuss himself states, quote, "I like nonsense. It wakes up the brain cells. Fantasy is a necessary ingredient in living. It is a way of looking at life through the wrong end of the telescope, which is what I do, and that enables me to laugh at life's realities," unquote. What if Seuss did not only write books to teach children how to be adults? What if he wrote them to teach adults to be like children too? As adults, we tend to lean towards the literal reading, towards the moral, towards the story's usefulness. Yet, somehow, personal responsibility is tied to an elephant sitting on a bird's egg, waiting for it to hatch. There is a concept of fulfillment that shines through Seuss. Both the moral and the creativity are necessary. Reading Seuss as adults, you tend to, what makes Seuss so compelling is that reading him as a child, you are introduced to the lessons. As an adult, you have heard those and seen those same lessons in 100 different ways, backward and forward, left and right. Yet, Seuss gets to adults in a way the other stories don't. The simplicity, the directness, the authenticity in a Seuss story draws out the imagination of childhood. Herbert Anderson, a professor at Seattle University, states in his article, Sense and Nonsense in the Wisdom of Dr. Seuss, quote, "It is difficult to read Dr. Seuss without getting caught up in the spontaneity and unfiltered delight of discovery and surprise. What is often lost in the careful calculations and measured responses of adulthood is the immediacy of childness that is a prelude to wonder. Reading Dr. Seuss not only encourages wonder and imagination, it is a practice in being surprised," unquote. So, I would encourage everyone in this room, do not discount yourself as a child at any age. As you go on to your 16th, or your 17th, or your 18th year of life, do not lose all of who you were at 6, at 7, at 8. As you go on to your 46th, or your 56th year, do not lose all of who you were on the first day of kindergarten. A person's a person no matter how small. Do not lose the you that likes chocolate milk in the mornings and running around barefoot and imagining strange places where exotic birds live, places where they serve their ham with green eggs. Thank you.